She made a deal with the devil to save her husband's dream. Isabella Morgan stood in the penthouse of New York's most dangerous man, her wedding ring catching the city lights as Dominic Russo circled her like a predator. One night, Mrs. Morgan. His voice was velvet over razor blades. "Stay with me tonight, or your husband loses everything by Monday morning." What she didn't know. Her husband's crisis wasn't random. Dominic Russo had been destroying James Morgan's company for 18 months, and Isabella was always the endgame. 2 days earlier, Isabella's biggest worry was feeling invisible in her own marriage. Now she was standing in the ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria, about to meet the man who would change everything. But before we get to how Isabella ended up in Dominic's penthouse, you need to understand 3 things. First, her husband James was a good man, the kind who built billion-dollar companies with integrity. Second, Dominic Russo wasn't just dangerous. He was patient, and he'd been watching Isabella for 2 years. Third, by the time Isabella realized she'd walked into a trap, it was already too late to walk away. The question wasn't whether she'd go to Dominic. The question was whether she'd come back. The Waldorf Astoria's crystal chandeliers scattered golden light across Manhattan's elite like stars, refusing to stay in the sky. Isabella Morgan adjusted the champagne silk of her gown and tried to remember the last time she'd felt beautiful, instead of just well-dressed. Around her, tech moguls discussed disruption, and venture capitalists calculated risk, their voices weaving a symphony of ambition that used to thrill her. Used to. "Bella?" James appeared at her elbow, sandy hair slightly disheveled, blue eyes apologetic in that way she'd learned to read like headlines. His bow tie hung loose, and she could see the tension in his shoulders. Even exhausted, her husband looked like he'd stepped from a magazine cover. All-American success. Self-made brilliance. The man who changed her life 5 years ago. Another crisis. Isabella kept her voice light. Understanding painted on like the rose lipstick she'd spent 15 minutes perfecting. "It is Marcus from the board." James's phone buzzed insistently against his chest pocket. "I am sorry, just 15 minutes. Then I am completely yours." She touched his cheek, feeling the stubble he'd missed shaving this morning. "Go save the world. You are incredible, you know that." He kissed her forehead, already moving away, already gone in every way that mattered. "I don't deserve you." Isabella watched him disappear into the crowd, her smile fading like watercolor in rain. 15 minutes would become 30. 30 would stretch to an hour. This was their life now. TechCore's product launch had consumed James like fire eating paper. Board meetings at 5 a.m. conference calls during their anniversary dinner last month. She'd learned to sleep in the middle of their king-sized bed, because there was no point staying on her side anymore. She wasn't angry. Anger required energy she'd stopped spending. This was the dream they'd built together in that tiny Brooklyn apartment, James coding until dawn while she sketched product designs on napkins, both of them running on cheap pizza and cheaper ambitions. But dreams had a cost. She just hadn't realized she'd be paying it alone. "Mrs. Morgan." The voice cut through the ballroom noise, like a knife through silk. Isabella turned. The man studying her looked like Sin, dressed in a midnight blue suit. Tall dark hair swept back from a face that belonged in Renaissance paintings. All sharp angles and classical beauty, twisted into something modern and dangerous. But his eyes stopped her breath cold, nearly black, holding an intelligence that felt predatory, like he could see through expensive dresses and polite smiles straight to the hollow space inside her chest. "I don't believe we've met," Isabella said, and hated how her voice sounded. Small, uncertain Dominic Russo. He extended his hand. The name registered like a warning bell. Russo, Italian family. Rumors of connections to things wealthy Manhattan whispered about, but never spoke aloud. When Isabella took his hand, his grip was warm, confident, lingering 3 seconds too long. "We have met, actually," Dominic continued. his accent making every word sound like an invitation. 2 years ago, Children's Hospital fundraiser. You wore emerald green. Someone said something funny and you laughed. Really laughed. I remember thinking I'd never heard anything so genuine in a room full of calculated charm. Isabella's pulse quickened traitorously. She remembered that dress, didn't remember him. How had she missed a man who looked like fallen angels and sounded like temptation? That is quite a memory, Mr. Russo. I remember important things. His smile was slight, almost sad, and call me Dominic. Mr. Russo is my father, and we don't speak anymore. Why not? The question escaped before Isabella could stop it. Dominic's smile widened fractionally, like she'd just passed a test she hadn't known she was taking, because I refused to live the life he chose for me. But that is a story for another time. He gestured toward the bar. Your glass is empty. May I? Isabella glanced at her champagne flute. When had she finished it? I should find my husband. He is on his 4th call with the board, Dominic said casually, something about creditors. Unfortunate timing. The words hit like ice water. How do you know that? I make it my business to know things, especially about people who interest me. He stepped closer, just inside the invisible boundary of personal space. Not touching, but close enough that she caught his scent, expensive cedar and something darker. And you interest me very much, Isabella. The use of her first name should have felt presumptuous, not touching. Instead, it felt intimate, dangerous, like he'd just claimed something that didn't belong to him. I don't think, dance with me. Not a question. Dominic was already moving, his hand settling at the small of her back with confident pressure, guiding her toward the floor where couples swayed beneath cascading light. Isabella should have refused, should have walked away. But the ballroom suddenly felt suffocating, and her feet were moving. And then the orchestra swelled into something slow and haunting. Dominic's hand found hers. His other arm circled her waist. They moved together like they'd done this 1,000 times. When was the last time James danced with her? You are tense, Dominic observed quietly. Relax. You are making me uncomfortable. Good. His smile showed teeth now, sharp, knowing. Comfort makes people invisible. You've been comfortable so long you've forgotten what it feels like to be seen. You don't know anything about me, don't I? He spun her smoothly. And when she came back into his arms, his face was inches from hers. Close enough to see gold flecks in those dark eyes. Close enough to feel his breath against her temple. You wake at 6 a.m. even though you have nowhere to be. Old habits from when you worked. You drink your coffee black, no sugar, standing at the kitchen window watching sunrise over Central Park. You read design magazines you never discuss with anyone because you've convinced yourself that part of your life is over. His voice dropped lower, intimate as secrets. Every Tuesday you volunteer at the Children's Art Therapy program. But James doesn't know because he never asks about your day. And every night you fall asleep alone, wondering when you became a ghost in your own marriage. Isabella's heart slammed against her ribs. Stop. Why? Dominic's grip tightened fractionally, not painful, possessive. Because I am telling you truths your husband is too blind to see. James Morgan is a brilliant man, revolutionary. But he is a fool when it comes to you. He has a masterpiece and treats her like background decoration. I need to go. Isabella tried to pull away, but his hand held firm. In a moment, first, you need to hear this. His expression shifted, still intense, but edged with something that looked almost like concern. Your husband's company is dying, Isabella. Real trouble. Not the kind fixed with another funding round or viral marketing. The kind that ends in bankruptcy and federal investigators asking uncomfortable questions. The room tilted. What are you talking about? TechCore owes $15 million. Various creditors. Payment due Monday morning at 9 a.m. Dominic's voice was matter-of-fact, reciting someone's execution date. If James can't deliver, the company collapses. His reputation burns, everything you both sacrificed for. Gone. And the beautiful irony. He leaned closer, his lips nearly brushing her ear. He doesn't even know yet. Isabella stopped moving, though the music continued. How do you? I told you, I know things. Dominic's thumb traced a small circle on her back. The gesture should have felt threatening. Instead, it felt grounding, like he was the only solid thing in a spinning world. But I can fix it. Every debt, every angry investor. I can give James his dream back, better than before. Why would you do that? Because I want something in return. The words hung between them like smoke. Isabella's breath caught. She knew what was coming, could feel it in the way his eyes held hers, in the possessive warmth of his hand against her spine. One night, Dominic said quietly. You with me. The ballroom sounds faded to white noise. You are insane. I am honest. There is a difference. His face was calm, almost gentle. I am not asking you to love me, Isabella. I am not even asking you to pretend. Just one night, dinner, conversation. Let me show you what it feels like to be someone's complete focus for a few hours. In exchange, James keeps his company, his future, the dream you sacrificed your own ambitions to help him build. You are asking me to betray my husband. I am asking you to have dinner with me. Dominic's voice was silk over steel. What happens after that is your choice. But be clear about what you are choosing. Say yes, and I save everything James cares about. Say no, and Monday morning his world ends. Either way, you'll know exactly how much his dream is worth to both of you. The music stopped. Around them, couples separated, applauding politely. Isabella felt like she was drowning in a room full of air. Dominic released her, but the absence of his touch felt colder than it should have. He pulled a card from his inside pocket, heavy stock, cream color, a phone number embossed in silver, no name, no company, just 10 digits that suddenly felt like a lifeline and a noose twisted together. 48 hours, he said, pressing the card into her palm. His fingers lingered against hers for a heartbeat. I'll be waiting for your call, Mrs. Morgan. Then he was gone, disappearing into the crowd, like he'd never existed. Isabella stood frozen on the dance floor, the card burning against her skin. There you are. James appeared, slightly breathless. Phone still clutched in his hand. Sorry that took so long, crisis averted. Well, mostly averted. We need to schedule an emergency board meeting for Monday. But he stopped, really looking at her for the first time all night. Bella, you okay? You look pale. I am fine. The lie tasted like ashes, just tired. Let's get you home. James wrapped an arm around her shoulders, warm and familiar and utterly oblivious. As they walked toward the exit, Isabella's hand closed around Dominic's card in her clutch. What she didn't know yet, Dominic Russo had spent 18 months engineering James's financial crisis. Every creditor demanding payment, every investor pulling out, every banking complication. All of it orchestrated. All of it designed to bring Isabella to exactly this moment, and the truly terrifying part. This was just the beginning. Isabella didn't sleep that night. She lay in their king-sized bed, James snoring softly beside her, exhausted from his crisis calls, and stared at the ceiling. City lights filtered through gauze curtains, painting shadows that seemed to move like living things. The business card sat on her nightstand. She hadn't looked at it since they'd gotten home, but she could feel it there. Waiting. One night dinner conversation. Dominic's voice echoed in her head, like a song she couldn't stop humming. His words had burrowed under her skin. finding all the lonely spaces she'd convinced herself didn't exist. When did you become invisible? At 3 a.m., Isabella gave up on sleep. She pulled on her robe and padded to the kitchen, the marble floor cold against her bare feet. Their penthouse apartment overlooked Central Park, 23 floors of steel and glass that James had bought the day Techcor's valuation hit $1 billion. She decorated it carefully. Soft grays and warm creams, art from emerging artists, plants that required attention she had time to give. It was beautiful, empty, like a magazine shoot no one actually lived in. Isabella made coffee. Black, no sugar, stood at the window watching dawn bleed pink across the skyline. Below, the city was waking. Delivery trucks, early joggers, people with purpose. She used to have purpose. Used to wake at 5 a.m. buzzing with design ideas, sketching concepts that made James's code sing. When had she stopped? Hey, Isabella jumped, coffee sloshing over the rim of her mug. James stood in the kitchen doorway, hair sticking up, wearing the MIT t-shirt she'd bought him 7 years ago. It had holes now. She kept offering to replace it. He kept refusing. Sorry. Didn't mean to scare you. He crossed to her, wrapping arms around her from behind, chin resting on her shoulder. Couldn't sleep, just thinking. About a stranger who sees me more clearly than my own husband. About how I can't remember the last time you asked what I was thinking. About whether I am brave enough to save your dream or selfish enough to let it burn. Nothing important, Isabella said, instead. James was quiet for a moment. Then, softly, I know I've been distant lately. The launch, the board, everything with funding. It is just this one push, Bella. Once we're past this quarter, things will calm down, I promise. She'd heard that promise before. Last quarter. Last year, the year before that. James, is Techcor in trouble? She felt him tense against her back. What makes you ask that? Just something someone mentioned at the gala about creditors. It is under control. His voice shifted into CEO mode, confident, controlled. The voice he used with investors who asked uncomfortable questions. Nothing you need to worry about. Translation, don't ask. Don't push. Let me handle the important things while you handle the decorative ones. Isabella turned in his arms, studying his face. James had always been handsome, but 5 years of 18-hour days had carved lines around his eyes. New gray threaded his temples. When had that happened? I love you, she said, and meant it. That was the cruel part. She loved him. Loved the man he'd been. Loved the dream they'd built. But love wasn't always enough, was it? I love you too. James kissed her forehead, chaste, comfortable, the kind of kiss you gave your sister. I've got an early call with Tokyo. Try to get some sleep, okay? He was gone before she could respond, padding back to his home office, where he'd probably stay until morning. Isabella turned back to the window, watching the sun fully break free of the horizon. The business card seemed to pulse on the nightstand 3 rooms away. 24 hours passed like water slipping through fingers. Isabella went through the motions of her life. Morning yoga class where she bent her body into shapes that required no thought. Lunch with her friend Sophia, who talked about her own husband's affair, while Isabella made sympathetic noises and wondered if neglect counted as infidelity. Afternoon volunteering at the Children's Arts Center, where 7-year-olds created masterpieces with fearless enthusiasm. One little girl, Maya, painted a family. Mother, father, child, all holding hands under a sun that took up half the canvas. That is beautiful, Isabella said softly. It is my family, Maya explained, adding more yellow to her sun. My daddy says families are supposed to stick together no matter what. No matter what. Isabella thought about that all evening. Through dinner with James, who ate while typing on his laptop. Through a movie she watched alone while he took calls in his office. Through another night of sleeping beside someone who felt miles away. At midnight, she picked up Dominic's card. The number looked ordinary, just digits, not a gateway to hell or salvation, just a phone number. What would happen if she called James would get his company? His dream, everything he'd worked for, would be safe. And all it would cost was one night with a stranger who looked at her like she was worth looking at. What would happen if she didn't? Monday morning, creditors would call. James would scramble. Maybe he'd find a solution. Maybe he wouldn't. But either way, she'd know she could have saved him and chose not to. Isabella picked up her phone, put it down, picked it up again. This is insane. You don't even know this man. He could be lying about everything. But what if he wasn't? Her thumb hovered over the numbers. Have you ever been so desperate to save someone that you'd sacrifice everything? Isabella was about to find out if love meant loyalty or letting go. The call connected on the second ring. Isabella. Not a question, like Dominic had been sitting there waiting. Like he knew she'd call. His voice was exactly as she remembered, smooth, certain, dangerous. How did you know it was me? I've been waiting for you to call for 47 hours. Who else would it be? Isabella's hand tightened on the phone. The apartment was dark except for the city glow through windows. James was asleep in his office again, passed out on the leather couch with his laptop still open. I haven't decided anything, she said carefully. You called, that is decision enough. A pause. She heard the clink of ice in a glass. What are you wearing? Excuse me, it is a simple question. What are you wearing right now? Isabella looked down at herself. Old NYU t-shirt. James's actually. Soft from 1,000 washings. Sleep shorts. Hair piled on her head. Why does it matter? Because when I picture you, I want the image to be accurate. The intimacy of that statement stole her breath. He'd been picturing her, thinking about her in the 47 hours since the gala. While she'd been agonizing over this decision, he'd been waiting with patient certainty. This is crazy, Isabella whispered. Yes, I shouldn't be talking to you. Number? James is a good man. I am sure he is. Dominic's voice softened fractionally. But that doesn't mean he is good for you. Not anymore. You don't know anything about my marriage. I know you've made 4 calls to marriage counselors in the past 6 months, hung up each time before they answered. I know you sleep in the center of your bed now instead of your side. I know you stopped wearing your wedding ring to yoga class 3 weeks ago because the instructor noticed and asked if you were okay, and you lied and said it was being resized. Isabella's breath stopped. How? I told you. I pay attention. The gentleness in his voice was somehow more terrifying than anger would have been. This wasn't obsession. It was patience, strategy. Like he'd been studying her the way generals study battlefields. What do you want from me? Isabella asked, and hated how small her voice sounded. Everything. One word, absolute final. But I'll settle for one night to start, Dominic continued. Saturday 7 p.m. I'll send a car. We'll have dinner. Talk. Nothing more unless you decide otherwise. And Monday morning, your husband wakes up to find his financial crisis miraculously resolved. This is blackmail. This is business. His tone remained calm. Matter of fact, you have something I want. I have something you need. We make an exchange. Very simple. There is nothing simple about this. No, Dominic agreed quietly. But it is honest, which is more than you and James have been with each other for a long time. So here is my final offer, Isabella. Saturday night, my penthouse. Dinner and conversation. What happens after that is entirely your choice. I won't force you. I won't manipulate you. But I will show you what it feels like to be chosen, to be seen. To matter to someone more than a quarterly earnings report. Isabella closed her eyes behind her lids. She saw 2 futures. In one, she hung up. Deleted the number. Monday came. James fought. and probably lost. Their marriage continued its slow fade to gray. In the other, she said yes, stepped off a cliff into darkness, and maybe destroyed everything she'd built for a chance at feeling alive again. "If I do this," she said slowly, "no one can know. Ever. You have my word." And Monday, the debts disappear. Every single one. Plus a cash infusion that'll put TechCore's valuation at $2 billion by end of quarter. James will think he is a genius. And what do you get? Silence on the line, long enough that Isabella thought the connection had dropped. Then, so quietly, she almost missed it. A chance to show you who you could be if you stopped settling for being convenient. The words hit like lightning, not because they were cruel, because they were true. "Saturday," Isabella heard herself say, "but I am not promising anything beyond dinner." "Understood." Dominic's voice warmed with something that sounded like victory, like satisfaction. "One more thing, Isabella. Wear red. You look extraordinary in red." The call ended. Isabella sat in the darkness, phone clutched in her hand, and wondered what she'd just done. In his office, James snored softly, dreaming of code and market shares and success, completely unaware that his wife had just made a deal with a devil who wore Armani and spoke fluent temptation. The card was still burning on the nightstand. But now it felt less like a noose and more like a key. Isabella had just crossed a line she could never uncross. But was she saving her husband, or finally choosing herself? Saturday arrived like an execution date Isabella had scheduled herself. She spent the morning in mechanical motion shower, hair, makeup applied with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. James left early for an emergency board meeting, kissing her cheek absently, promising to be home by dinner. She didn't correct him, didn't mention she wouldn't be there. The red dress hung in her closet like an accusation. She'd bought it yesterday at Bergdorf's, using cash so James wouldn't see the credit card statement. Silk. Backless. The kind of dress that announced intentions she wasn't ready to admit. How did Dominic know she'd own something red, or had he known she'd buy it specifically for him? At 6:45 p.m., Isabella's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "The car is waiting downstairs." She looked at herself one final time in the mirror. The woman staring back was familiar but foreign: red lipstick, hair falling in waves over bare shoulders, eyes that held equal parts fear and something that looked dangerously like anticipation. "You can still back out," she whispered to her reflection. But they both knew that was a lie. The car was a black Mercedes with windows so dark she couldn't see inside until the driver opened the door. He was professional, silent, asked no questions as Manhattan blurred past the tinted glass. Isabella watched the city transform from her familiar Upper East Side to neighborhoods she'd never visited, ending at a building that looked like it had been carved from midnight itself. "Miss Morgan," the doorman said, like he'd been expecting her. "Mr. Russo is waiting, penthouse level." The elevator was all mirrors and soft lighting. Isabella watched herself rise through 40 floors, each one feeling like a layer of her old life peeling away. Her wedding ring caught the light. She'd almost taken it off. Decided that would be too much like admitting defeat. The elevator opened directly into the penthouse, and Dominic was waiting. He stood by floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking a city that looked like scattered diamonds on black velvet. He'd changed from his business suit into dark slacks and a white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. Casual, devastating. When he turned and saw her, something flickered across his face too fast to read. "Red," he said softly. "I knew you would be breathtaking." Isabella stepped out of the elevator, her heels clicking against marble floors. The penthouse was minimalist. Modern art, expensive furniture that looked like sculpture. Everything in blacks and grays except for one wall covered in photographs. Black and white images, street scenes. Strangers caught in private moments. Beautiful and invasive in equal measure. "You are a photographer," Isabella said, surprised. I told you, I pay attention to things most people miss. Dominic moved closer, not touching, but near enough that she caught his scent again. Cedar and something darker. You are nervous. I am terrified. Good. Fear means you understand the stakes. He gestured toward the dining area where a table was set for two. Candles, white roses. But I promise you, Isabella, tonight, you are completely safe. Nothing happens that you don't choose. Then why does this feel like a trap? Dominic's smile was sad. Because the most dangerous traps are the ones we walk into willingly. Dinner was Italian. Homemade pasta. Wine she didn't drink because she needed her mind clear. Dominic talked about art, about cities he'd lived in, about growing up in a family where every choice was predetermined. He asked about her design work, and Isabella found herself talking about dreams she'd buried so deep she'd forgotten they existed. Why did you stop? Dominic asked, refilling her water glass. James needed me focused on TechCore. The company was growing so fast, someone had to handle the business side while he coded. That is not what I asked. Dominic's eyes held hers. Why did you stop? Not why did James need you to. Why did you choose to sacrifice your passion for his? Isabella opened her mouth. Closed it. She didn't have an answer that didn't sound like giving up. You think I don't understand loyalty, Dominic continued quietly. But I do. My father wanted me to take over his businesses. Continue the family legacy. I said no. He said I was betraying everything he'd built. Maybe I was. But living someone else's dream is just a slower way to die. James didn't force me to, but he let you disappear. And that might be worse. The words hung between them like smoke. True, cruel, undeniable. Why are you doing this? Isabella asked. Really, not the business answer. The real reason. Dominic was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood, offering his hand. Come with me. I want to show you something. He led her to the wall of photographs. Up close, Isabella could see the artistry in each image. A woman laughing in a cafe window, an old man feeding pigeons in Washington Square, a couple arguing on a subway platform, faces twisted with genuine emotion. I take these when I am supposed to be at business meetings, Dominic explained. When I am supposed to be playing the role my family name demands. These moments, people being completely themselves, that is the only thing that feels real anymore. He pulled one photograph from the wall. Isabella's breath caught. It was her, 2 years ago, based on the dress. The Children's Hospital fundraiser. She was mid-laugh, head thrown back, completely unguarded. The joy on her face was so genuine it hurt to see. This is the moment I first saw you, Dominic said quietly, not as James Morgan's wife, not as decoration at a charity event, but as a woman who knew how to feel deeply, who was still alive behind all the perfect veneer. He turned to her, and his eyes held something raw, vulnerable. And every time I've seen you since, you've been a little more faded, a little more ghost than woman. So yes, I engineered James's crisis. Yes, I manipulated circumstances to bring you here. But not because I want to own you, Isabella. He stepped closer, and this time when he raised his hand to her face, she didn't pull away. I want to remind you that you exist. Isabella's heart was thunder. By blackmailing me. By giving you permission to choose something for yourself instead of being chosen. His thumb traced her cheekbone, gentle, reverent. James chose you once, then forgot to keep choosing you. But you, Isabella, when's the last time you chose anything that wasn't about making someone else's life easier? She should move away, should slap his hand down, should be furious at his manipulation and presumption. Instead, she whispered, "What happens now? Now you decide." Dominic's hand fell away, giving her space. You can leave. The elevator is waiting. And Monday morning, James still gets his miracle. I keep my word regardless. Or you stay. And we see if the woman in this photograph still exists somewhere underneath all the years of making yourself smaller. Isabella looked at the photograph again. At the woman she'd been before. Convenient became her defining characteristic. Before understanding meant accepting neglect as love. James is a good man, she thought. He loves you in his way. But Dominic's voice echoed. Does he love you enough to see you disappearing? The city glittered below them. Millions of people making millions of choices. Most of them small, safe, easily justified. Isabella turned back to Dominic. He was watching her with that same intensity from the ballroom, but now she recognized it. Not possession, not conquest, recognition. He saw her, really saw her, really saw her. And that was more seductive than any touch could ever be. If I stay, Isabella said slowly, I need you to understand something. I love my husband. Whatever happens tonight doesn't change that. I know, Dominic's smile was gentle. You think that makes you weak. It makes you extraordinary. You are about to betray every vow you took, and you still lead with honesty. That is why I've been waiting 2 years for this moment, Isabella. Not because you are beautiful, not because you are married to a man I want to destroy. He moved closer, and this time she didn't step back. But because you are still capable of choosing yourself even when it costs you everything. Isabella's breath came shorter. She could feel the heat radiating from his body. Could see the pulse jumping in his throat. One step would close the distance between them. One word would change everything. Dominic, Isabella, before you finish that sentence, you need to know something. The tone in his voice made her freeze. Something had shifted. The vulnerability in his face transformed into something harder. Calculating. What? He moved to the bar, poured himself something amber, drank it in one swallow. When he turned back, his expression was unreadable. Your husband didn't get into financial trouble through bad luck or market conditions. The words came out flat, factual. I've been systematically destroying TechCore for 18 months. Every creditor who called their debt. I bought that debt. Every investor who pulled out. I convinced them to. Every complication, every delay, every problem that made James's life hell. I engineered all of it. Isabella's world tilted. What? The question you should be asking is why. Dominic set down the glass with deliberate care. And the answer is going to hurt, so I need you to stay very calm. Her hands were shaking. What did James do to you? Nothing. This was never about James. The truth hit her like freezing water. This was about me, Isabella whispered. All of it. You destroyed his company to get to me. Yes. One word. No apology. No justification. Just brutal honesty. You are a monster. Yes, Dominic agreed quietly. But I am a monster who sees you, Isabella. Who knows that you've been dying slowly for 5 years. Who was willing to burn your husband's world to the ground just to give you one night of feeling chosen. He moved toward her, and she backed away until she hit the window. So now you have the full truth. I am not your savior. I am your husband's enemy, and everything I've said tonight is still true. You can leave. The deal stands. Or you can stay, knowing exactly who and what I am. Isabella's mind was racing. This man had spent 18 months destroying James, had manipulated her into this penthouse, had probably planned every word, every gesture, every moment designed to make her feel seen. And the most terrifying part, it had worked. She did feel seen. For the first time in years, someone had looked at her and decided she was worth this level of focus, this level of effort, even if that effort was monstrous. "I should hate you," Isabella said. "You should. I should call James right now, tell him everything. You should. But you know I won't." Dominic's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Because you finally understand, don't you? James would forgive you. He'd blame himself. He'd try harder for maybe 6 months before falling back into old patterns. You'd spend the rest of your life being grateful he took you back, making yourself even smaller to prove you deserved his forgiveness." Every word was a knife between her ribs because it was true. "Whereas I," Dominic continued, closing the distance between them until they were inches apart, "I'll never forgive you for being extraordinary. I'll never let you disappear. I'll never take you for granted, because I know exactly how much I risked to get you here." His hand came up to her face again, and this time Isabella's eyes closed traitorously. "So choose, Isabella. Safety with a good man who has forgotten how to see you, or danger with a monster who has thought about nothing else for 2 years." Isabella stood between two futures. Both would destroy her in different ways, but only one would let her feel alive while burning. Isabella's hand came up to his chest. For a moment Dominic thought she was pushing him away. Then her fingers curled into his shirt. "If I do this," she whispered, "if I stay tonight, I need something from you, anything. Tomorrow, you leave us alone, forever. You fix James's company, you disappear, and you never tell him what you did. Let him think he saved himself. Can you do that?" Dominic's expression flickered. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked genuinely surprised. "You are bargaining now. You said I could choose. This is me choosing." Isabella's voice strengthened. "One night you get 1 night to prove I still exist. Then you let me go back to my life and try to remember who that woman in the photograph was. And if you can't go back," Dominic's voice was rough, "if after tonight convenient isn't enough anymore, then that is my problem to solve, not yours." For a long moment they stood frozen. Then slowly Dominic smiled. Real, genuine. Nothing calculated about it. "You are magnificent," he said softly. "Absolutely magnificent. And James Morgan is the greatest fool I've ever met for not seeing it. Do we have a deal?" Dominic's hand slid from her face to the back of her neck, fingers tangling in her hair. "We have a deal. 1 night, then I disappear. But Isabella." Yes, his lips hovered just above hers, close enough that she could feel his breath. "I am going to make sure this 1 night ruins you for anyone else." He kissed her. And Isabella Morgan, loyal wife, good woman, perfect decoration, kissed him back. Outside the windows, the city glittered on, indifferent to one woman's fall from grace or her desperate attempt to remember what it felt like to be chosen. Somewhere across town, James Morgan slept in his office, dreaming of code and quarterly reports, completely unaware that his wife was in the arms of his destroyer. And in the penthouse, as Isabella finally let herself feel something other than convenient, she made a choice that would change everything. But what she didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that James wasn't asleep. He was reading emails from an anonymous source, emails that contained photos of Isabella entering Dominic Russo's building, with timestamps, and a message: "Your wife is with the man destroying your company. Thought you should know." The trap Dominic had set for James was about to snap shut. But the trap James was about to set for both of them, that one no one saw coming. Isabella thought she was choosing herself. Dominic thought he was winning. But James Morgan hadn't built a billion-dollar company by being naive. And revenge, when it came from a good man pushed too far, was the most dangerous kind of all. Isabella's phone shattered the moment. It buzzed on the glass coffee table where she'd left it, the vibration loud as gunfire in the silent penthouse. She pulled away from Dominic, her lips still burning from his kiss, her heart hammering against her ribs like it was trying to escape. The screen glowed with James's name, 3:47 a.m. Don't answer it, Dominic said quietly. But there was tension in his voice now. Something had shifted. Isabella's hands trembled as she reached for the phone. He never calls this late unless he knows. The words hung between them like a death sentence. Isabella stared at Dominic, seeing her own fear reflected in his dark eyes. How could James know? They'd been so careful. The car, the private elevator, the building with its discreet doorman trained not to see anything. The phone stopped ringing, started again immediately. "I have to answer," Isabella whispered. Dominic nodded slowly, stepping back to give her space. But his expression had transformed into something harder, more calculating. The vulnerable man who'd kissed her moments ago had vanished, replaced by someone who looked ready for war. Isabella's finger hovered over the screen. Every instinct screamed not to answer, to throw the phone out the window, to pretend this moment could last forever. But she'd never been good at running from consequences. She answered. "James, where are you?" His voice was wrong, too calm, too controlled. The voice he used in board meetings when someone had betrayed him, when he was about to destroy a competitor with surgical precision. I am, don't lie to me, Bella." Still that terrible calm. "I know exactly where you are. Dominic Russo's penthouse. 40th floor. You've been there for 3 hours and 22 minutes. Isabella's blood turned to ice water. Beside her, Dominic's expression darkened. "James, let me explain. Is he there with you? Put me on speaker." "James, please. Put me on speaker, Isabella." The crack in his voice was worse than shouting. Isabella looked at Dominic, who nodded once. She pressed the speaker button with shaking fingers. "I am here, Morgan," Dominic said, his accent more pronounced now. Defensive. "Dominic Russo." James's voice filled the penthouse like poison gas. Italian family with connections to waste management and construction. Real estate holdings across 3 states. And according to the FBI agents currently sitting in my living room, the architect of an 18-month campaign to destroy my company. Isabella's world stopped spinning. "FBI," she whispered. Surprised Bella, James's laugh was bitter. "You think I built a billion-dollar company by being blind? I've known about Russo's manipulation for 6 months. Every creditor he bought, every investor he pressured, every single move he made, I documented. And tonight, while my wife was busy falling for his psychopath routine, I was handing federal prosecutors everything they need to put him away for 20 years. Dominic moved fast. He was at his desk, pulling out a laptop, fingers flying across keys. His face had gone completely blank. Emotionless. "You are bluffing," Dominic said flatly. "You have nothing concrete. Business deals aren't crimes. Extortion is, racketeering is. And using offshore accounts to launder money through shell corporations. That is 15 years minimum." James's voice was acid. "But here is the beautiful part, Russo. You were so focused on Isabella, so obsessed with breaking her away from me. You got sloppy, left trails, made mistakes, and I caught every single one." Isabella sank onto the couch, her red dress suddenly feeling like a costume. A lie. Everything was a lie. "James," she tried again. "I didn't know, didn't you?" Now the pain bled through his control. "You accepted his offer, Bella. You got in that car. You put on that dress. You went to the man destroying our lives, and his voice broke. What exactly did I interrupt?" The silence was damning. "That is what I thought." James's breathing was ragged now. "I gave you everything. Built a life for us. Worked myself to exhaustion to give you security, comfort, everything you could want. And the first time someone paid attention to you, you threw it all away. You stopped seeing me." Isabella's voice cracked, tears burning her eyes. When was the last time you asked about my day, my dreams? When was the last time you looked at me like I was more than just part of the furniture? So you thought betraying me was the answer? I thought. Isabella choked on the words. I thought I didn't matter anymore. To you. To anyone. And he made you feel special while he was destroying me. James's tone went cold again, surgical. That is his gift, Bella, making people feel seen while he is stabbing them in the back, and you fell for it. My brilliant, talented wife fell for the oldest con in the world. Dominic closed his laptop with a sharp click when he spoke. His voice was eerily calm. You want to play recordings of our conversation for the FBI. Be my guest, Morgan. I never touched your wife against her will. Never threatened her directly. Everything that happened tonight, she chose. And you are right about one thing, I did make her feel seen. Because you'd stopped bothering. Don't you dare, James started. You stopped bothering to notice she was dying inside that perfect penthouse. Stopped bothering to ask what she wanted. Stopped bothering to treat her like anything other than a beautiful accessory to your success story. Dominic's eyes found Isabella's, and there was something like regret there. I may be a criminal, but at least I saw her value. You just saw convenience. Noble speech from a man who destroyed my company to get in her bed. I destroyed your company because you destroyed her first. You just did it so slowly she didn't notice until it was too late. Enough. James's shout echoed through the speaker. In the silence that followed, Isabella could hear sirens in the distance, growing closer. Those are for you, Russo, James said quietly. FBI agents, NYPD backup. They'll be at your door in approximately 90 seconds. I suggest you use them wisely. Dominic's jaw clenched. His eyes scanned the penthouse like he was calculating exits, options, possibilities. And Bella, James continued, voice breaking again. You have a choice to make. Come home right now. We'll call it temporary insanity. We'll say Russo manipulated you. I'll forgive you. We'll get therapy. We'll fix this, or, Isabella whispered. Or you stay there and explain to federal agents why you were meeting with a known criminal. Explain to the press. Explain to our friends. Explain to everyone we know why James Morgan's wife was in Dominic Russo's penthouse at 4 a.m. wearing a dress that cost $3,000. The sirens were louder now, very close. Isabella looked at Dominic. He was watching her with those dark eyes that had seen through every wall she'd built, that had recognized her when she'd forgotten how to recognize herself. I won't ask you to stay, Dominic said softly. This is my war, not yours. Go home to your husband. Try to salvage what is left. But his smile was sad. Accepting, I gambled everything tonight, Isabella. Gambled that you'd be strong enough to choose yourself. But choosing yourself doesn't mean choosing me. It means knowing your own worth regardless of who sees it. The elevator dinged, heavy footsteps in the hallway. Authoritative voices. Last chance, Bella, James said through the phone. Choose now. Isabella stood, her red dress catching the city lights one final time. She looked at Dominic, this dangerous, obsessive, broken man who'd seen her completely and wanted her anyway. Then she looked at her phone, where James waited, good and hurt and offering forgiveness wrapped in guilt. Neither choice would save her. But only one would let her keep what was left of herself. I am sorry, Isabella whispered. She wasn't sure who she was apologizing to. Then she was moving toward the elevator, her heels clicking against marble, her reflection fragmenting in the mirrors as she descended. Down, down, down through 40 floors, each one feeling like a year of her life rewinding. The lobby was chaos. FBI agents, police, flashing lights painting everything in urgent blues and reds. They didn't stop her. She was the CEO's wife, the victim. The woman who'd been manipulated by a criminal mastermind. No one needed to know she'd gone willingly. The same black Mercedes waited at the curb. Different driver. This one wore a badge. "Mrs. Morgan, I'll take you home," the agent said gently. "Your husband is waiting." Isabella slid into the back seat, and through the tinted windows, she watched them bring Dominic out in handcuffs. His white shirt was wrinkled now, his hair disheveled, but even restrained, even defeated, he carried himself like a king. Their eyes met across the distance. And Dominic smiled, not his calculated smile, not his seductive smile. A real smile, tinged with something that looked like relief. He mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." Then he was gone, loaded into a federal vehicle, and Isabella was being driven through a city that was already waking up. Early joggers. Coffee shops opening. People starting normal days in normal lives. She'd never felt further from normal in her life. James was waiting in their penthouse. He stood by the same window where Isabella had watched so many dawns alone, his back to the door, shoulders rigid with tension. The apartment smelled like cold coffee and desperation. "James, don't." He didn't turn around. "Not yet. Let me say what I need to say first." Isabella set down her clutch, slipped off her heels, waited. "I failed you." The words came out rough, broken. "I got so caught up in building TechCore, in proving I could succeed, that I forgot why I was doing it. It was supposed to be for us, for our future. Instead, I sacrificed our present. I let you become invisible. And when someone finally saw you again, you ran toward them because I'd left you starving for attention." He turned then, and Isabella saw tears tracking down his face. James Morgan, who never cried, who faced down venture capitalists and hostile boards without flinching. "But Bella, you broke my heart tonight, shattered it. And I don't know if I can forgive that. I don't know if I want to." "Then why did you tell me to come home?" "Because I love you, because 5 years of marriage should count for something," because his voice cracked. "Because losing you would hurt worse than anything Russo could do to my company." Isabella moved closer, close enough to see the exhaustion in his eyes, the pain, the desperate hope he was trying to hide. "I don't know if I can be who you need," she said honestly. "I don't know if you can be who I need. But James, I do know this. We've both been lying. You've been lying about how much work consumed you. I've been lying about being okay with disappearing. And tonight, I almost made the worst mistake of my life, because we were both too afraid to tell the truth." "Did you?" James couldn't finish the question. Isabella held his gaze. "He kissed me. I kissed him back, but then you called. And I chose to come home, not because I was afraid of consequences, but because despite everything, despite feeling invisible, I still believe the man I married is in there somewhere. And that man is worth fighting for. Even if I failed you, even if we both failed each other." James closed the distance between them, pulling her into his arms. He smelled like coffee and stress and familiar comfort. Isabella let herself lean into him, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her cheek. "We need help," James whispered. "Real help, therapy time. Probably a year of me groveling. Probably 2 years." His laugh was wet. "Genuine deal." They stood there as dawn broke over Manhattan. 2 people who'd almost lost everything, clinging to each other in the wreckage, and hoping it was enough to rebuild from. But 40 floors below in a federal holding cell, Dominic Russo wasn't defeated. He sat alone, handcuffed to a metal table, and smiled. James Morgan thought he'd won. Thought his documentation and federal contacts would be enough to keep Dominic locked away. But James had underestimated 2 things. First, Dominic's family connections went deeper than real estate and construction. Judges, prosecutors, Politicians. The kind of power that made evidence disappear and cases fall apart. Second, Isabella Morgan had just proven she was stronger than both of them had realized. She'd walked away from temptation, chosen loyalty over passion, made the hard choice. And Dominic Russo had always been attracted to strong women. One of the FBI agents entered the holding cell young, ambitious, the kind who could be bought with the right pressure. "Mr. Russo, your lawyer is here," the agent said. But his eyes held a message. "Everything is arranged. Everything is arranged." Dominic nodded slowly. "Tell him, I'll need 3 things. First, a review of all evidence procurement procedures. Second, a motion to dismiss based on illegal search and seizure. Third," he paused, thinking of Isabella in that red dress, of the way she'd looked at him before choosing to leave, of the strength it took to walk away from something that felt that right, even when it was so wrong. "Third," the agent prompted, "tell him to find out everything about James Morgan's therapy schedule, his travel plans, his daily routines. And most importantly," Dominic's smile was sharp as broken glass, "find out when Isabella Morgan is most likely to be alone." Because this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. James Morgan had won the battle, saved his marriage, sent his enemy to prison. But Dominic Russo had always been playing a longer game. And the best part, Isabella had proven she was capable of choosing herself, of walking away from safety into danger. She'd done it tonight, even if she'd ultimately chosen to go home, which meant she could do it again, given the right circumstances. The right pressure, the right moment of weakness in a marriage, held together by guilt and determination, rather than genuine reconnection. Dominic had 18 months of patience. He could wait a little longer. After all, good things came to those who waited. And Isabella Morgan was worth waiting for. Isabella chose loyalty. James chose forgiveness. But Dominic Russo chose revenge. And when a patient man with unlimited resources decides you are unfinished business, no amount of therapy or federal protection can save you. 6 months later, Isabella stood in her new design studio, a space James had insisted on leasing for her as part of their new beginning, and stared at the blank canvas in front of her. Therapy was helping. Their marriage was healing. James came home for dinner 3 nights a week now. They talked, really talked. But sometimes, late at night, Isabella would wake up and remember the feeling of being completely seen, of someone looking at her like she was the most important thing in the world. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. The text message contained 3 words and a photograph. "I am waiting, Isabella." The photograph showed the penthouse window, the same view from that night. But in the reflection of the glass, superimposed like a ghost, was the image of her in the red dress. Dominic had been released. All charges dropped due to procedural irregularities. His lawyer had been very good. Isabella's hands shook as she deleted the message. She should tell James, should report it to the police, should do everything right. Instead, she stared at the blank canvas and wondered if the woman in the red dress was gone forever, or if she was just waiting for permission to exist again. The choice, as always, was hers. But this time, Isabella wasn't sure which choice would save her, and which would finally set her free. They say every woman has 2 lives. The second one begins when she realizes she has only one. Isabella's second life was just beginning. But would it be with the good man who failed her, or the dangerous one who saw her? Some choices don't have right answers. They only have consequences.